welcome to Tom's Hit Parade. Sorry I didn't get a video out to you last weekend. I had plans on Saturday, and by Sunday morning I was feeling really crappy, so a video just wasn't going to happen. I had intended to do my backtracks for April last weekend, but well, who wants to see a video when the host looks like death warmed over? So, and I had intended to do my backtracks this weekend, but a couple of things, unexpected things happened. One of them good and one of them not so good, both of which I will talk about in today's video. First of all, the not so good, as I'm sure by now you've heard, Tim Bergling, the Swedish DJ, producer, and electronic artist known as Avicii, died on Friday at the age of 28. Now, death alone is sad, of course, very, very much so, but to have somebody, especially somebody so talented, die before their 30th birthday is just an absolute tragedy, and I was probably as shocked as everybody else was. He had an impact on my listening habits, definitely. Before he came along, I only had a few electronica CDs in my collection. One of the first I picked up was Movement and Still Life by BT, partly because of the single Shame, which I'd heard and really enjoyed, and also because of his work with NSYNC. And then I, who could resist the big singles that Fatboy Slim had on the radio, so I had to pick up their greatest hits collection. And then there's when One Republic put out their first album, I became a big fan of theirs. And so I saw that Paul Oakenfold's A Lively Mind had Ryan Tedder featured on 3 or 4 tracks, and so Ryan Tedder could do no wrong at that point, so I had to pick this one up. And then I was a huge fan of the original Tron movie back in '82, and the score by Wendy Carlos was one of my favorites growing up. And so when the sequel came out in 2009 or 2010, I had to pick up the soundtrack, and I don't think they could have made a better choice for the music than Daft Punk. And I became a fan of theirs so much that when their Grammy-winning album of the year, Random Access Memories, came out a couple years after, I had to pick that up. So, and I've been a fan of Daft Punk ever since. So, and then I also had a childhood friend of mine who I had lost contact with for many years, probably 15 years, until I reconnected with him on Facebook, only to have him pass away just a few years later. He was very much into the Chemical Brothers, so whom I had never really bothered trying listening to. So, and he sent me a little SD card with a whole bunch of their music on it, and I ended up taking a liking to some of it, so much so that I bought their Push the Button CD, which I thought was pretty good. But yeah, that was pretty much the entirety of my electronic-related music until Avicii came along in 2014. And he had the crazy idea of incorporating elements of country and folk music into EDM, and it was such a crazy idea that it actually worked. And I loved the singles that I'd heard on the radio, so I had to pick up the album, and I loved the rest of the album just as much. When I had to buy his follow-up album as well. And I actually enjoy Stories as much as I enjoy True. And I'm fortunate enough to have the Japanese versions of both of these albums. So yeah, and so ever since Avicii, I've been incorporating a steady diet of EDM-related music into my listening habits. I had to pick up Zed, enjoy both of their albums, very much so. And then there was Kygo and Tiesto. I went right along into David Guetta and Afrojack. I actually have the Japanese version of his CD. It's got, 6 or 7 bonus tracks on it compared to the American version. And then into a couple of my most recent acquisitions. Too many CDs in my hands. Morgan Page. I picked up his In the Air album, which I really enjoy. And then I recently picked up Alesso's album, Forever. So, as you can see, my taste in this kind of EDM music doesn't really move beyond the pop subgenre of, collections of 3 to 5 minute songs featuring an array of guest vocalists. So yeah, that's kind of the limit of my listening habits so far, but I'm very confident that in my own time, pretty soon, I will expand into the more atmospheric, I guess you'd say, which in a way I kind of already have. One of my latest obsessions actually is the French electronic music group R.I.P, and I picked up their first album and I really enjoyed it, and I went on a splurge and bought like four more of their albums, and I've been enjoying each one tremendously. And this is really good music for just putting on in the background when you're doing something else, but then it's got enough presence in itself that you can just sit there and listen to it, and it's really entertaining. So check R out if you haven't yet. They're really good. So yeah, as you can see, Avicii really had an impact on my listening habits, and continues to do so. And he's responsible for a fair little chunk of my CD collection. I can only imagine what he would have come up with for his third studio album, but unfortunately we'll never know. Godspeed, Avicii. A lot of us are going to miss you. So now on to the second and more upbeat half of my episode this week. Record Store Day. Yesterday was the big day, of course, and to be honest, I have mixed feelings about Record Store Day. Its original idea was fantastic. I mean, 12 years ago, record stores were really hurting for business. So this little group of people got together, kind of a grassroots effort to advocate for record stores, to get people into record stores that ordinarily wouldn't go into record stores. But honestly, in the last few years particularly, it's really lost its meaning. I mean, now it's all about, the commercialization of it has just gotten way out of hand. It's all about those exclusive releases. Go and get your hands on the exclusive releases. Well, record store was originally intended for people to go in and buy the stuff that's already on the shelves. I mean, that's what the retailers really want. I mean, instead they're bogged down with buying this ever-expanding list of exclusive releases, so they use up a bunch of money on that would be able to actually go into the upkeep of the record store, and to keeping it still there, but instead they're using all this money to buy the exclusive releases that, frankly, probably a lot of people go in to buy them and then turn around and sell them on eBay for 3 times as much. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I believe in capitalism and, free enterprise. I have a problem with exploitation. And in my opinion, that's what that is exploitation. But that's a discussion for another time. I did not expect to take part in Record Store Day this year. Just last Saturday, I was able to go up to Salem to what I believe is the biggest FYE store in Oregon. So I was able to buy a small bunch of stuff there. And so yeah, I did not expect to be able to go to Record Store Day this year, but the opportunity presented itself, so I went in. Now, I am not the kind of person that's going to go there and camp out at like 3 a.m. and, wait for the doors to open and go take part in the mad rush. I actually didn't show up at the store until 10:30, and to my surprise, they actually had a couple of the exclusive releases. Yes, I just railed on about the exclusive releases, but, be that as it may. What am I going to do, pass them up? Seriously. So yeah, I was able to get a couple of the exclusive releases I did not expect would still be there at 10:30. So I thought I would show you what I picked up this weekend and last weekend. So this is a conflation of what I bought on Record Store Day and what I bought up at FYE a week ago. So yeah, the first one I bought was the Universal Love EP that Kyle from Track by Track talked about a couple weeks ago on one of his episodes. Was really hoping they'd still have that there, and they did. And I did not expect that they would still have Duran Duran live at Budokan at 10:30, but they still had 2 copies of it there, and I was able to pick up one of them. Frankly, I was pretty much physically incapable of leaving the store without this in my hand. So yeah, that was fantastic that it was still there 2.5 hours after the store opened. So and then bought a couple of LPs up at FYE last Saturday. They had a clearance section of sealed LPs for half off. So I picked up Jake Bugg's On My One. Not my favorite album of his, but I liked it enough that I figured I'd buy it on vinyl, particularly for $12. I mean, hey. And then I love Cyndi Lauper from back in the day, and so I was kind of intrigued at this country album that she did a few years ago, so I decided I'd go ahead and pick that one up, and have not listened to it yet, but look forward to it. And then I found a handful of CDs, of course. Isao Tomita is a electronic artist, kind of like a contemporary of Wendy Carlos from, he's been active since like the 70s, I think. So he has a greatest hits CD of his electronic renditions of music. And then Ray Charles, Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music, volumes 1 and 2 on a single CD. They are just fantastic albums if you haven't listened to them. I mean, something that in my opinion, every music fan should listen to, at least volume 1 of Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music. And this is the Concord release from 2009, both albums on one CD. And then this was kind of a cool one I found out at FYE. It's a Rhino compilation called Legends of Harmonica. And I'm not a huge blues fan, but, you know, I kind of dig harmonica in songs, so I decided to pick that up. Charlie McCoy, Fabulous Thunderbirds, Django Reinhardt, Charlie Musselwhite Blues Band, Harry Belafonte song is on here, Jay Giles Band. So yeah, it definitely intrigued me enough to pick it up. It was only like $7, I think. And then another $7 purchase, 2 discs of Booker T and the MGs. Now, if you're familiar with Stax Records, Booker T and the MGs was the house band for Stax. They did all the music that you'd hear on the classic cuts by Sam and Dave and Otis Redding and Wilson Pickett. That's these guys playing, and of course they had a handful of hits under their own name later on. So yeah, definitely worth $7, 2 CDs of them. And then I was able to add a title to my catalog of Japanese imports, Vangelis Themes. I bought this used for $6. There's the Obi strip right there, excellent condition. Yeah, it's got, you know, Chariots of Fire, Blade Runner, just all the big hits of Vangelis. And I know this one got lukewarm reviews at best, but I was just too darn curious to pass this one up. The Sting and Shaggy compilation, or collaboration, that just got released, I had to pick that one up and give it a try. And then, if you saw my favorite albums of 2017 episode, you know how nutso I was over the Baby Driver soundtrack, and I had no idea they put out a second volume of Baby Driver music. So it's like, you know, kind of like the Duran Duran LP. I could not leave the store without buying this. So yeah, those are my recent acquisitions, record store day and before. So yeah, what record store day gems did you pick up? Let me know in the comments. And what time did you actually camp out at the record store there? I'm curious to know that. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Next episode is coming up much sooner. I want to make up for lack of episodes recently. So subscribe if you haven't yet. Click the little button right down there that says subscribe. And again, thanks so much for watching. And remember, life's too short to be a music snob.